The announcement that Origin Energy will close its Eraring power station in 2025, 7 years earlier than previously planned, also has huge political implications in the sensitive New South Wales federal seat of Hunter. Business Editor Ross Greenwood joins me now. Ross, take me through the logic of closing the power station, which supplies 20% of New South Wales.
Yeah, so I've been in touch with the energy grid operator, that is the Australian Energy Market Operator, AEMO, this morning. And effectively what's happening here is that the coal-fired power stations are just simply losing economic viability. Not only in many cases are they ageing, but the second part about this is that they're literally being overrun. The grid's being overrun by rooftop solar power. So all of those people who have gone out there and got solar power on their roofs, and they're putting much of that back into the grid. Well, really, in many ways, this is meaning that the coal-fired power stations, which have to operate continually, are sitting by idly. And so as a result of this, the economics of running those coal-fired power stations is becoming less and less viable as the years go on. So when the power stations are older, especially in the case of, say, Eraring is one very good example of that, it really means that bringing forward the end of them becomes a much more easy option, I guess, for the companies involved. Now, the other side of this conversation is really all about not just the politics, because Joel Fitzgibbon, the Labor candidate who said he's standing down at the next federal election, holds the seat by just 3%. And the important part about this is at the last election, it was One Nation that picked up 21% of the votes in this seat of Hunter. So federally, it's a really important seat for all of the parties involved because, again, it's the marginal party, in particular One Nation, that has big influence in this electorate as well. Then you come to the final part about this, about industry. Industry in particular, big aluminium smelters, makers of fertilisers, steel mills, they need continuous power 24 hours a day. And so really, if the government, you heard Matt Keane earlier say that the government wants to invest heavily into batteries, what that's all about is trying to make certain that industry is not disrupted and that while really the sun is down and there is no rooftop solar going in excess during the daytimes, that there is enough to make certain that industry is viable and that indeed many other jobs, not just the jobs at these power stations, can be preserved long term.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. Can't wait to see the political reaction out of Canberra. I've already heard from Matt Keane this morning. He's obviously focused on a jobs package and says, confident that he can fill this void with renewable energy. Your initial thoughts on that, Ross?
Well, it's interesting because, yes, there are big battery projects coming in Australia rapidly, like really quickly. And you can't discount the fact that really the technology is changing very, very quickly. But can I just say that given what we've seen in the last little while with the closure of the power stations from AGL, they're bringing them forward, but they're younger power stations. And so they're out into the late 2030s and to 2045. But the important thing about this is what I think you're seeing, even this week, is a tipping point in the way in which Australia gets its electricity. It's really now a case where there is so much solar rooftop and indeed wind farms, solar farms, all these things feeding into the grid. The important aspect of this is to have the batteries that are big enough and commercial enough to be able to provide the shortfall in electricities when the sun doesn't shine, when the wind doesn't blow. And that is really one of the keys. And in many ways, I think this is the reason why Matt Keane today has said he wants to invest heavily in these batteries. So say, for example, the one that's in South Australia, built by Tesla, will really, really be a stopgap in the case of about 15 minutes of electricity. So that's not big enough. It's not viable enough. So it's going to be either gas, it's going to be hydro, but it's got to be these giant batteries that also provide the power on an ongoing and sustainable basis for businesses around Australia.
Yeah, there might be a bit of rewriting of energy policies in the lead up to the election. We will see.